This is leveraging serious games to assist motivation and education. What we were looking at here is really two problems that we were trying to solve at once. And towards that, we created a system called the Cyber-Kinetic Effects Integration System. And so the first problem that we were looking at was DoD has limited resources available for continuing training. Extremely limited. As I mentioned with the ACE program, we were running up against that. And so we need to get the most bang for our buck when we're doing this training. The problem is experts really drive innovation. So I'm actually really happy to have gone after Professor Brumley because he made a lot of the points that I was going to make. He made them for me. So when you have examples like Loki, for example, that can sit down and own most of the browser market in an afternoon, well, he creates capabilities that expand what your whole force can do. 500 of your newest recruits that are just learning assembly aren't worth what he can bring to your force. Well, that's true across the range of cyber operators. Your experts are the ones that are really going to drive innovation. They're the ones that are going to create the tools, create the capabilities that are going to be used by the majority of the force. So the problem is, though, as Professor Brumley mentioned for me, was we're competing with industry. We're not just competing with the other countries. And so the thing that DoD has always been good at is growing capabilities in-house. And so the question is, how do we create these outliers? How do we take that new recruit and get him so interested in increasing his skills that at the end of the day, after the trainings that we provided, he goes home and continues teaching himself? Because those are the ones that are going to drive innovation for us. The service member that at the end of the day goes home and creates a VM of all the tools that he needs. Some of you might know exactly who and what I'm talking about. For his own personal use, that then becomes so useful that it gets copied out and all of the CPTs get a copy of it. Well, those are the people that are really driving the force forward. We need to create them in-house. The second problem is we're living in what's increasingly an interconnected world. Cyber-physical systems are proliferating faster and faster. And so the face of DoD operations is actually changing. We're being asked to support operations on a more and more tactical level rather than just on a strategic level as cyber operators. And so the problem that arises from that is our current training is cyber on cyber. So cyber is not supporting the mission, cyber becomes the mission. And so what we end up with is unrealistically locked down systems. So if you're only going to be grading me on whether I got exploited or not, just like in that Cyber Grand Challenge, well, great. Everything's locked down, the system's unplugged, powered off, I didn't get exploited. Great. Fantastic, right? Well, this is kind of the behavior that we see from training participants. What we need to do, though, is bring the rest of the mission back into the fold, so they actually have to support a larger mission. And now what they decide to do has to be graded on how it affects that larger mission that they're supporting, just like in real life. The other problem is, because we don't integrate with the kinetic domain, the cyber operators aren't aware of the kinetic effect, the kinetic implications of their systems, and vice versa. The classic example is there was a bridge that was taken out just because of a demolition, and they took out a fiber optic line that was running across underneath it when they demoed the bridge. That knocked a village off the internet for 6 months. Well, now, if I do that during live operations and I go bomb a bridge, and I didn't know that our operators were actually in their command and control system monitoring their troop movements through a fiber line that went across that bridge, I just denied our own capabilities. And so these are things that we're not training right now that we really need to be. So how do we bring reality back into the fold in order to solve both these problems? Our approach was first and foremost to integrate a realistic representation of kinetic operations back into cyber training. So we took this STEP technology that we have, this mature cyber platform, and integrated it with a realistic kinetic simulation. This allowed us to create a gamified training experience that you can see here, where cyber operators and kinetic operators can work side by side, supporting one another, and develop an appreciation of the realities of each other's mission. Beyond that, we could bring in a competitiveness. We could bring in... sorry, the video's has audio with it. We could bring them in and create a really competitive experience where teams are going head-to-head in these environments and able to compete with one another. What I wanted to see is, I want to see those operators, when we finish a scenario and they lost, I want to see them go to the mess and be talking to each other. Hey, I had this great idea. Here's what we can do next time. We're not going to get beaten next time. Or we're in second place. Here's how we're going to get into first. And so Towards that, we created our first scenario, our first Sky scenario. So participants were placed in a support role in a cyber kinetic operation. So first they received training that supports the mission that they were going to execute, and then they were placed into that real-time mission execution role. They got to survey the environment, they got to figure out how they're going to get into networks, and then they had to actually support that mission. And of course, during that mission, they just happened to come under cyber attack and had to defend their own networks while this was going on. They were told ahead of time that they were responsible for defending their networks, but they weren't, of course, told what was going to happen. And we created environments around them that really drove the immersion into the scenario. So the first mission that we came up with was actually a hostage rescue mission. So we have a reporter being held hostage by enemy forces. We created a fictional island that's been taken over by extremist forces. Rather ISIS-inspired storyline. So we had basically they took over the island, and we were more than happy to not get involved in somebody else's regional issues. That being said, that was true up until the point where a video gets uploaded to YouTube. A well-known American reporter who we didn't know was doing an undercover story there about corruption on the island has now been captured. They prominently show her face and basically make the usual, we want X million of dollars in the next 6 hours or we're going to behead her. So now we're in a no-notice, hasty operation, and we have to go in and rescue this hostage. However, because of the situation, our personnel are outmanned and outgunned. The only way they can be successful is to outsmart our opponents. And so our participants had to, as I mentioned before, defend their own infrastructure. So there was surveillance drone and communication systems that they could use to either look at what's going on in the kinetic simulation, as well as to communicate out with the team. Those systems would come under attack during the course of the mission, and if they weren't able to secure them, they would become disabled. And then they also had to attack enemy cyber-physical systems, lighting and power in the village, the complex where the hostage was being held. It was the central police complex for the island, and so it has its own backup power. So if you disable power to the village, that has its own generators. There's while the enemy forces don't have night vision, there's searchlights around there, so you have to disable the searchlights. There's alarms that could go off. You have to disable the alarms. You can and so forth. So one of the things that we really wanted to do was look at how these kinds of capabilities affect the training. How do they capture the participants' attention and their motivation? Now, unfortunately, motivation for long term is outside of the scope of what we could do during the time that we had to do this execution, but attention we could, during the course of the training, figure out with a good study design. Steve Henderson actually took the lead in designing this particular study, where we worked in cooperation with ISC Squared to create, as part of their high school summer cyber challenge, a within subjects designed experiment where the high school students would come in from all over the region. Actually, I think we even had some from as far as Germany come in and participate in our event, and then we would evaluate how their attention was, because we weren't limiting them. They were free to do whatever they wanted to do, but we provided the structure and wanted to see how much of their attention we were able to capture. And so we designed the study such that both groups would get the same course, just in different orders, where they would be briefed of the mission they had to do, provided with a set of trainings, and then have to actually execute the mission. So we had two missions, these two groups. The first one was Opulent Bluegrass. This was essentially our more traditional, less gamified evaluation without that cyber-physical component. And this essentially provided our control. And so we created a feedback mechanism during their lab period, where we had a scrolling task board projected at the front of the room that would be populated dynamically based on how they completed their tasks. And a similar board was created for when they were in their mission. They were given a mission that was a more business-centered mission, so defeating a botnet that was spreading in the network, something we placed them conceptually in an RCC. So we piped in background audio, the kind of things that you would hear there, and we projected that scoreboard as they went through their immersive experience there. Then we created a similar feedback mechanism for the Kinetic group. This is our cyber shooting range, as we called it. So as they were working through their training materials, as they were doing the labs and the preparatory stuff, when they completed a task, this shooting range was constantly projected in front of their group. And so as they completed a task, events would be triggered. This video is actually from an earlier version of it, where we were firing it manually, but it will automatically give them this sort of feedback. for each task as they would knock down these targets by completing hardening tasks or exploit tasks, etc. And so that gave them the stimulus during the training. Then during the execution, we actually created forward operating base Kyle. So Fob Kyle was placed in our room we have called the CDLC. We put camo netting across the top. We piped in background audio of what you'd probably hear, gunfire, helicopters, etc. If you're actually out in the field. And their mission planning documents were projected all around them to really immerse them in the experience. And then what we did is we actually had the kinetic operations run by our staff members. So our staff members were off in a separate room on the other side of the building on the radio with them through that. As we mentioned, there's a communication system, and so they actually had to guide them through actually executing the operation. And I will say that in this case, we were providing the kinetic operations and the students were the cyber operators, but it doesn't have to run that way. We've run scenarios as well where participants provide all of the capabilities. So the participants are providing both the kinetic and the cyber operations. So this is all designed so that it can be used by the end user. And at least anecdotally, I will say extremely high engagement from the students in this part. When we were in the opulent bluegrass scenario, all you had to do is walk through the back of the room and you could see what video games they were playing on the systems as the mission when they were supposed to be doing their training. Whereas here, when you have a kinetic team on the other end of the radio saying, hey, I'm pinned down, why are those lights still on? I can't move forward, I'm going to get shot, I'm going to get noticed. All of a sudden, you get that laser focus from the whole team of like, okay, why aren't those lights off? I thought we already exploited that. And so I'm going to go right into a live demo here. As everybody knows, nothing ever goes wrong with a live demo. What you should be seeing here now, hopefully, is a view of our system running in live operations. So I'll use this. So what you have here, Joe, I think we just lost the drone. Okay, that's been running for 4.5 hours, and now it crashed right this second. Of course. That. Live operation. Yeah, exactly. So there we go. Thank you, Joe. If you could find the squad while I'm talking, Joe, that'd be great. So if you see here in the top left, we have the squad leader, and that is one of our kinetic operators, be it our staff or the participants, depending on how you've engineered your training. Their job is to go in, get the hostage, get out. Up here in the top right, you can see my view as white cell. So that's actually this machine I brought up here with me that's reaching back to the CIC so I can run it. What I wanted to show with this is not only how bad the hotel wireless is, but to show that I don't have to be co-located. So my team can be in the CIC, my team can be in Korea, and I could be running the operation from here. And then what I can do is I can live go and follow them through the execution of their mission, as well as make changes, adapt to what they're doing from this white cell view. Just to give you a quick view, let me switch here to the default camera. Hopefully it's not. Here, I'll turn on night vision so that you can see what's going on. So here's our view, our eye in the sky view, as white cell of what's going on. Here we go, our village. This is easier to do with a mouse than a touchpad, but let me switch back to visible light. There we go. And you can actually see there's our village that our participants are going to try and move through in order to go and rescue that hostage. So down here on the left, there's a drone that's available to them that provides intel. And down here on the lower right is actually security camera feeds that are of IP cameras that are in that facility. This is the view that the kinetic participants would get. Screen 1 and screen 3 here. So they would have their kinetic operators and their drone operator. This is the view that White Cell has. How do they get this view? Well, I'm glad you asked. We'll get to that in 1 second. This is the view. Give me 1 second here because I'm switching video live. Cut to that. This is the view that our cyber operators have. So this for... Has that updated the video? There we go. Let's make that a little bigger. So this is the view that our cyber operators would have. For those of you familiar, this is the STEP platform, same thing we use for CyberFlag, CyberGuard, etc. So in here, I'm starting with the Kali box. So my cyber operator, he sits there, he logs into his Kali box, can start doing reconnaissance on the network. He can go start exploiting systems and so forth. I'm going to do the good housekeeping or whatever cooking show you like. I'm going to pull out the baked turkey and skip right onto the systems from the admin, just so that you don't have to watch me typing away at a keyboard for half an hour. So as I'm going through, I pivot into the enemy's network. Spoiler alert, they have a very badly configured DNS system. I managed to get a shell on there. I pivot into their internal network. And on their internal network, I find I can get access to this system. It's a really old Windows XP box that hasn't been patched since it was probably installed. Shocking. This is the building management system. I'm sure nobody here knows of an HVAC vendor who hasn't patched their systems. So now I'm on that system, and I'm in their building management system, and here I have control of temperature, power, etc. for various systems. So I'm going to quickly here jump. Actually, I think you can view it on the side there. You can see here. Joe, can you point the drone at the complex and go to visible light instead of FLIR? Thank you. So as soon as Joe gets the right location there. Yay, live demo. So it doesn't usually do that. Actually, I think that might just be the feed that's being pushed out with GoToMeeting. So I'll just do it from the admin view. So here we have our complex again. There we go. So look here at this end of town. There's a police complex, which is has their courtyard. It has a fence, and there are searchlights illuminating the area around the perimeter that are looking for anybody approaching. And so if I actually go into the system, and as a cyber operator who has gained access to the system, I have my team telling me, hey, there's searchlights, can you do anything about that? Well, yes, I can. I turned off the power to the searchlights, and now what's going to happen is that's going to propagate through the system. Let me switch back here. And so what you'll actually see is, bang, searchlights went out. And so by making changes in the cyber environment, those changes propagate out to the Kinetic environment. So now those guards, they're not going to have the lighting available to them. We have night vision. They don't. Now's your chance to run up to the fence, cut through the fence, get in, try and go rescue the hostage. Well, wait, there's this whole complex here. I don't know where the hostage is. How am I supposed to go? I'm going to go sweep and clear every room in this facility? Trust me, that hostage will be well dead before I get there. Our AI for the enemy forces there is programmed to kill the hostage if they detect that there's a rescue attempt going on. So I go and need to access the system. Again, hey, cyber operators, can you help me out here? Well, I noticed that there was this system on port 80 when I was scanning in there that was serving up a web page. Oh, look, security cameras. I wonder if I can do anything about that. Oh, it's already got my SQL injection saved in it, so that's convenient. There we go. So I did my little SQL injection in order to get into the system. And now I can see actually live view in our cyber environment of the Kinetic simulator. So it's actually going both ways. So I can actually get a view into the Kinetic environment from the cyber environment through their IP cameras. And now if I look at it, I can actually look at the environment and see, oh look, building 2, East End, there's our hostage. That's where you're going to have to breach into to go rescue the hostage, and so forth. Unfortunately, in the interest of time, I'm not going to be able to show, but if they fail to defend the drone, the drone operator can get kicked out of the system, the drone can crash. If they fail to disable the alarm system, alarms start going off, quick response team responds to it, and so forth. So that's our system.